Camilla never expected a quiet diplomatic reception at Windsor Castle to turn into a public embarrassment involving her own daughter, but that's basically what happened according to the reports surrounding this whole situation. And honestly, the reason people have been so obsessed with this story is because it touches every single tension that already exists inside the royal family. You've got Queen Camilla trying to protect her side of the family, Catherine stepping more confidently into the future queen role, and King Charles caught in the middle trying to hold the monarchy together without looking weak in front of diplomats and officials. The whole evening was apparently supposed to be one of those polished royal events where everybody smiles politely, shakes hands, drinks expensive wine, and pretends there's absolutely no drama happening behind palace walls. International guests were there, ambassadors were there, aristocrats were there, and Windsor Castle was fully dressed up for the occasion. St. George's Hall reportedly looked incredible that night, with the chandeliers glowing over these massive banquet tables, while musicians played softly in the background. Very traditional royal atmosphere, very controlled, at least in the beginning. Now, one thing people immediately noticed was Laura Lopes being there at all. Laura usually stays away from official royal business. She's never really tried to become a major public royal figure, and most of the time she keeps her life fairly private. But according to insiders, Camilla had been pushing for Laura to attend this reception for weeks beforehand. Apparently she wanted her daughter included more closely in these kinds of elite royal spaces, which honestly already tells you a lot about the internal dynamics happening behind the scenes. At first, everything seemed normal enough. Laura showed up looking glamorous, dressed for the occasion, smiling, talking to guests. But as the night went on, people reportedly started noticing changes in her behavior. The wine kept flowing, servers kept refilling glasses, and eventually the atmosphere around her apparently started becoming uncomfortable for everyone nearby. Witnesses claim Laura became louder and less controlled as the evening continued. Her conversations reportedly became sloppy, and she allegedly started making comments that were not exactly appropriate for a room full of diplomats and senior royal figures. At one point, she was supposedly mocking royal protocol itself, which is already risky enough inside Windsor Castle, of all places. Then there were claims she made rude remarks about palace staff, while international guests were literally standing nearby listening. And this is where the mood in the room apparently shifted completely. People started quietly backing away from her area. Conversations became awkward. Guests were exchanging those subtle looks people give each other when everyone realizes something embarrassing is unfolding in public, but nobody wants to openly acknowledge it yet. According to reports, even Camilla herself started looking nervous from across the room while trying to maintain composure in front of the diplomatic guests seated near her. Meanwhile, Catherine was on the opposite side of the hall doing what she usually does during these events, smiling, greeting people, staying composed. But apparently, she had already noticed everything happening around Laura. And honestly, this part of the story is exactly why so many royal watchers ended up praising Catherine afterward. Because while everybody else was hesitating, she reportedly decided somebody needed to step in before the situation became even more humiliating for the monarchy. What's interesting is that Catherine supposedly didn't rush over dramatically or make some giant public scene. According to the reports, she approached Laura very calmly and very directly. People nearby immediately sensed something serious was happening just from the way Catherine carried herself walking across the room. Apparently, the atmosphere shifted the second she moved toward Laura. By that point, Laura was allegedly visibly intoxicated. Witnesses described her trying to maintain confidence while clearly struggling to stay composed. And then came the moment everybody keeps talking about. Catherine reportedly leaned in privately and spoke to Laura in a very controlled but firm tone. Nobody claims there were screaming or public shouting. That's important here. The entire thing was supposedly handled quietly, which honestly made it even more powerful in the eyes of the guests watching nearby. According to palace gossip, Catherine essentially told Laura it was time to leave before things got worse for both herself and the royal family. And apparently the way she delivered that message completely changed the energy around them. Charles reportedly stood there listening while the room stayed completely silent around him. And according to people who later spoke about the atmosphere that night, everybody was watching carefully because they understood this was no longer just about Laura Lopes embarrassing herself at a banquet. At that point, it had become a much bigger question about authority inside the royal family and who Charles trusted to protect the monarchy when things started going wrong publicly. What apparently bothered Charles most was not just Laura's behavior, but the fact that the entire situation had unfolded during an important diplomatic event. The royal family can survive personal scandals privately. They've dealt with that for decades. But when internal family problems start overshadowing official state functions in front of international guests, that becomes a different issue completely. Witnesses say Charles looked around the room and immediately understood how uncomfortable the atmosphere had become. Diplomats were whispering among themselves. Senior guests were visibly tense. Even palace staff reportedly looked nervous, trying to pretend everything was still under control. And according to insiders, Charles realized the longer the emotional confrontation continued between Camilla and Catherine, the worse it would look for the monarchy itself. Then came the moment people still keep debating online. Instead of publicly siding with Camilla, Charles allegedly signaled for aides and security to escort her away from the hall so the event could continue without further disruption. Now, to be clear, reports don't describe some dramatic removal scene with guards physically dragging anyone out. It was apparently handled quietly and formally. But the symbolism behind it was massive, because from the perspective of everyone inside that room, it looked like Charles had chosen institutional discipline over personal loyalty. Sources claim Camilla looked genuinely shocked by the decision. And honestly, if the reports are accurate, it's not hard to understand why. She had spent years fighting for acceptance inside the monarchy, years trying to secure legitimacy, both for herself and for her side of the family. So having her own husband appear to side with Catherine during a public royal conflict would naturally feel humiliating. After Camilla reportedly left the hall, the entire atmosphere changed almost immediately. Guests relaxed, conversations slowly resumed, and then Charles apparently did something else that became hugely symbolic afterward. According to witnesses, he walked directly toward Catherine and stood beside her in full view of everyone attending the reception. That image alone basically fueled days of royal commentary afterward. People interpreted it as Charles publicly signaling confidence in Catherine's judgment. Reports say he even praised qualities like discipline, loyalty, and putting the institution first while speaking during the remainder of the evening. And although he supposedly never criticized Camilla directly in front of the guests, many insiders believe the message was obvious anyway. After that night, the palace gossip apparently became relentless. According to royal insiders, Laura Lopes quietly disappeared from public social circles almost immediately afterward. Invitations reportedly stopped coming. Her appearances became rare, and people close to aristocratic circles claimed the embarrassment from Windsor followed her everywhere. Whether that's fully accurate or exaggerated through gossip is hard to know, but there's no question the story spread extremely fast among royal watchers. Camilla also reportedly pulled back from public visibility for a while after the incident. Observers claimed she appeared quieter during official engagements, and royal commentators began speculating that her influence inside palace decision-making had weakened significantly afterward. Again, the palace itself never publicly confirmed any of this. Officially, nothing dramatic happened. That's how the monarchy operates. But unofficially, people inside royal circles were clearly talking. Meanwhile, Catherine's reputation seemed to grow stronger from the entire situation. According to reports, diplomats and officials who attended the event came away impressed by how controlled she remained throughout the chaos. And honestly, this is the part that probably mattered most long term. People didn't just see Catherine as polished or elegant anymore. They reportedly saw someone capable of handling pressure without emotionally collapsing in public. Inside palace circles, that matters a lot. The monarchy survives almost entirely on perception, discipline, and stability. And according to the narrative that formed afterward, Catherine looked like someone already preparing mentally for queenship, while everyone else around her became reactive and emotional. What really made the story stick, though, was the contrast people couldn't stop talking about afterward. Camilla reportedly acted from instinct as a mother trying to defend her daughter, while Catherine acted from obligation to protect the institution itself. That's the framing that dominated conversations afterward, And honestly, depending on who you ask, people still completely disagree over who was actually right. Some believe Camilla's reaction was understandable because most mothers would defend their children in that situation. Others think confronting Catherine publicly during a diplomatic event was the exact mistake that damaged her standing with Charles in the first place. Either way, the entire Windsor incident ended up reinforcing one thing people had already been suspecting for years. Catherine is no longer viewed as simply William's wife learning royal duties. A lot of people now see her as the steady center of the monarchy's future. Catherine's image after that Windsor reception reportedly changed in a very noticeable way inside royal circles. Before this, a lot of people already respected her because she had spent years handling public pressure, carefully staying disciplined, and avoiding unnecessary controversy. But after this incident, the conversation apparently shifted from popular princess to someone people genuinely viewed as future queen material in a much more serious sense. And honestly, that difference matters. Being liked by the public is one thing. The royal family has had plenty of popular figures over the years. But being viewed as someone capable of protecting the institution during uncomfortable situations is a completely different category. According to palace insiders, that was the real takeaway from the Windsor situation for many people watching closely. In the days afterward, there were apparently constant whispers moving through Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, and aristocratic social circles across London. Officially, of course, nobody said anything. The palace maintained the usual silence, no dramatic statements, no confirmations, no denials. That classic royal strategy of pretending everything is perfectly normal while the entire country talks about nothing else. But privately, reports claimed the atmosphere between Charles and Camilla became noticeably colder after the event. According to insiders, Charles was deeply frustrated that personal family emotions had spilled into an official diplomatic function. That's supposedly what bothered him most. The monarchy survives through control, image, and structure. And from the reports surrounding this story, Charles allegedly felt Camilla lost sight of that the second she confronted Catherine publicly instead of handling things privately afterward. What's interesting is that nobody really questioned why Catherine intervened in the first place. Even people sympathetic to Camilla generally seemed to agree Laura's behavior had become a problem. The actual debate centered around whether Catherine should have handled it differently and whether Camilla's reaction afterward crossed the line. Some royal commentators argued that Camilla was acting like any protective mother would. Imagine watching your daughter get quietly removed from a royal banquet in front of diplomats and elite guests. Most parents would react emotionally to that. And honestly, that perspective is understandable. But critics of Camilla pointed out something else. They argued that once she chose to publicly challenge Catherine during the reception, she turned an embarrassing family issue into a visible power struggle inside Windsor Castle itself. And that's the part many believe Charles could not ignore. Because from the outside looking in, it suddenly appeared as if the monarchy was divided against itself right in front of international guests. Meanwhile, Catherine apparently continued handling everything the exact same way she always does. No public comments, no visible victory laps, no emotional reactions. According to people around the palace, she simply returned to work, continued her engagements, and avoided feeding the drama publicly at all. Ironically, that restraint probably strengthened her image even more. Royal watchers also started paying closer attention to small details afterward. Things like seating arrangements, event planning influence, and who Charles seemed to consult more frequently. According to palace gossip, Catherine's office reportedly gained more influence over future royal planning in the weeks following the incident, while Camilla's role supposedly became slightly less central behind the scenes. Again, none of this was ever announced publicly. The royal family rarely operates that way. Power inside the monarchy usually shifts quietly through access, influence, and proximity, rather than dramatic public declarations. But insiders claim the difference became noticeable if you were paying attention closely enough. Laura Lopes, meanwhile, reportedly stayed almost entirely out of sight after the incident. And honestly, that may have been the smartest thing possible under the circumstances. The story had already spread too widely by then. Every appearance would have restarted the conversation again. By the end of it all, the Windsor Banquet became one of those royal stories people kept discussing because it exposed something deeper than just one awkward evening. It highlighted the growing transition happening inside the monarchy itself. Charles may still be king, but many people increasingly see William and Catherine as the emotional and symbolic future of the institution. And whether the reports were exaggerated or completely accurate, one thing became very clear afterward. Catherine walked away from that night looking stronger, calmer, and more prepared for the future than almost anyone else involved. That's why the story stuck around. People weren't just reacting to Laura drinking too much at a royal event. They were reacting to the idea that in a moment of chaos, Catherine looked like the person most capable of restoring order without losing control of herself publicly. For royal supporters, that reinforced exactly why they believe she'll eventually thrive as queen. As for Camilla, the situation left people divided. Some felt sympathy for her as a mother caught in an impossible situation. Others believed her confrontation with Catherine became a serious political mistake inside palace walls. And honestly, that debate probably won't disappear anytime soon because it taps into larger tensions people already feel about the modern royal family and who truly represents its future best.